Hey guys, Coach Tom here. Just finished an awesome interview with the amazing Dave Meyer from the United States in California, and you guys got to check us out. You know, it goes for nearly an hour. We had a great conversation. We cover things like the biggest white belt topics that are done right and wrong, what separates the best from the worst jiu-jitsu competitors and students, and just how to balance your training and preventing injuries. You know, he's a guy who at 55 has got world titles, but also a lifetime of martial arts experience, including 30 years in jiu-jitsu. So it really gives an awesome perspective to actually give this advice from a man who's lived it. I loved speaking to Dave. He's been on my BJJ bucket list for a long time. I can't wait to train with him next year, and you guys are going to absolutely love this interview. So listen up. This is going to be a fun hour for you, and leave your comments for myself or Dave below. Take care.
Let's get started, Dave. Like I said, it's an honor to have you here. For those of you who don't know Dave, Dave is the author of this book here. This book, I lend this book out to my students all the time, Dave, that are competing for the first time. I still think it's the most succinct presentation of competing and how to get the right attitude for competing out there. So you created an amazing book. And I knew of you before that book came out. With the work you've done with John Will, who's coached me for a long time now. And I grew up my white belt. I had a white belt coach when I was a white belt. So I was always supplementing my learning, and your BJJ America stuff that you'd done with John was like my Bible, so to speak. Being a guy with a similar build to yourself, I was always trying to get your hacks, and John Will was always trying to give me your hacks. Like, this is what Dave does. So it's an honor to meet you, Dave. I know about your background, but can you please tell people a little bit about your background and how you started off? Because a lot of people don't realize you had a very successful traditional jiu-jitsu school in California before you'd even trained BJJ.
So I got involved in the martial arts as a little kid, sort of by accident. My parents wanted to put my older brother into a self-defense class. And I was 6 years old, he was 9, and there was a local community college near us where we had a cousin who was a black belt there. So, and that was jiu-jitsu, right? And I wouldn't call it a traditional style of jiu-jitsu. I mean, since the advent of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, people think of anything that's not Brazilian jiu-jitsu as traditional jiu-jitsu or Japanese jiu-jitsu. But obviously, there are highly ritualized, long-standing forms of jiu-jitsu, and then there's more modernized forms of jiu-jitsu before Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So this was that. This was a Japanese instructor, half Japanese, half American, actually. His name was Jack Seki. He was very well known in the area. Super tough guy, super small guy, really amazing jiu-jitsu practitioner before the days of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I started in that class when I was 6 years old. And I stayed with with jiu-jitsu all through growing up, and then trained other martial arts, going through high school and different styles of kung fu and, some kickboxing and things like that. And then, but always stuck with jiu-jitsu as a base, and moved through various styles of jiu-jitsu, spent a little time with some of the Danzanru people and Professor Wally J with his small circle stuff. We were good friends, and crossed paths a lot with judo during that time. And in fact, so I had a jiu-jitsu school that I was teaching, and I wouldn't say successful in the sense of I wasn't trying to make a living at it. I was always doing other things for a living and I wanted to keep jiu-jitsu fun. I didn't want it to be my have to teach today, every day to make a living thing. I wanted to do it because I liked it. And I realized those things are not mutually exclusive, but I never wanted them to become that. But so I did at various times teach classes, and actually, I was teaching one of those classes when I decided, okay, you know what? I've been teaching jiu-jitsu for a long time. I want to learn something new. And I was looking around, just like, what's out there that can make me a better fighter? I was always very interested in practical application for things. So I had gotten exposed to adrenal stress stuff, and then done stuff with that, and model mugging, which was, guys in the big suits. And I had actually just checked out a Muay Thai class, which I just thought was great. I took like a class, and I didn't have a lot of experience with that, and just got nauseous from the repeated leg kicks and the whole thing with Muay Thai. And I thought, And that's when I heard, just right about then, a former student of mine said, hey, I've been training with this Brazilian guy. You got to check this out. Like, there's this Brazilian kind of jiu-jitsu, and I'd never heard of it, right? And so he told me about it, and he showed me the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in Action tape, which is like the first tape that they put out there. And just looking at the tape, I thought, like, well, these guys are tough, but they're not doing anything special. Like, you know, they're hopping on what they call the mount. That was Tate Shio Gatame, like a 4-corner hold, you know. That existed. You know, Mata Leon, you know, rear naked choke. These are just like normal jiu-jitsu techniques. So I thought these guys are very tough and they're good. But until you feel the level, you can't understand. And to make a long story not quite as long, I had a few other like brushes with the concept, but it took a few weeks before I actually got on the mat. And the guy he was talking about was Higgin, right? And Higgin had been in town not for very long. And the first day I went to go check these guys out happened to be a very rainy day in Los Angeles, and Higgin and his brothers lived far away. Jean-Jacques didn't even live here in the U.S. yet.
Oh, really?
And they had one of their purple belts teaching that class. This purple belt happened to be this guy from Australia named John Will.
Oh, wow.
Who was in town teaching. So John, I showed up with my black belt in jiu-jitsu. John was there, a purple belt. I'm like, oh, no disrespect. Give me a white belt. I thought I was being nice, right? Little did I know, you know, that he cleaned the mat with me, obviously, being a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. And I think I was at what I would call a new blue belt level. That was my black belt in jiu-jitsu. In terms of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, got me, like, I could tap a couple of the blue belts. I could certainly tap the white belts, but I would have not a chance against the purple belt. And John was great even back then. And I remember thinking, okay, now if that's the purple belt, what are the black belts like? And then the next day, my question was answered because I went and trained with Higgin. And within a couple of weeks, I just decided to close down my school thing, which again, I wasn't doing it for money, and just told everybody, sorry, this is the thing I want to focus on. I decided to not go do the Muay Thai, do that another time, focused in on that. And so that's how I made the transition into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I had a real good head start because I already had a good mat sense and, you know, new arm bars and new chokes and stuff like that, but not at the level of detail that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has.
Wow. It is definitely one of those crazy experiences. I think I know I'd had a grappling experience for years before I first put a gi on and went to a proper academy. And, you know, even, you know, the good white belts, you're just like, whoa, you know, learning it online or through a book or, you know, training with people that aren't in a BJJ lineage, it can really surprise you. Well, I know it did me, but it got me hooked. Getting smashed just got me hooked. And
well, you know, funny you mentioned that because part of the story I didn't mention was in that period of weeks when suddenly I was hearing about these guys and my student had come back and said, I trained with these guys and I grappled him and I thought he was really good. And I was able to beat him. I don't know what I was, I'm sure, a white belt under Higgin. But then some other guy came walking into my school. John will remember this guy. And this guy came walking into my school, kind of a tough guy, you know, sort of thuggy, and watched a class of mine. This was before I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, then asked to grapple me. I'm like, okay, you know, we grappled. It was a big, hard fight. I eventually choked him out. I thought he was really good. And I asked him how long he'd been training, and he said a month with Hickson. And I'm like, and I remember thinking, like, that's not possible. Like, how could this guy be training a month and give me such a hard time? Like, I'm a black belt, but I still didn't understand. And then it was like 2 weeks later that I got on the mat with Higgin, who I don't have to describe to you what happened there. I mean, Higgin,
he's a beast.
He wasn't even like using his hands. I mean, he was flipping me over and talking to me and not breathing hard. And I was like dying and claustrophobic and choke him from the bottom and doing everything I could do. And it was just such a complete feeling of utter helplessness.
Yeah.
And then, you know, some months later, Jean-Jacques showed up, and like each brother I met was another level of weird, impossible experiences, right? So, yeah, but now I was lucky to get connected. I've been super lucky that I met John early on, because John has such an analytical approach that he was really helping me understand more quickly what I was learning. And John, because when John was in the States, he would be such a sponge, right? He'd have to get as much information as he could because he was going to leave for many months and no one would be there to correct him, right? There wasn't YouTube going on. There wasn't instructional videos. There was no one who knew Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu other than him in Australia. So he was so disciplined at paying close attention and asking questions. And when I was with him, that's how I started, by being the John and looking at how he did that. He's way, way better at that than me. But it really did help because I got a chance to see firsthand, oh, this is how you can, two people can take the same class, and one person gets this much and another person gets this much information. You be that person, right?
Yeah, I think I was lucky having John Will as my first instructor that took me through all the belts, because I think for me, I had a similar situation to him. I chose by choice not to train in my hometown. It was about an hour and a half away to the nearest gym. I thought, I want to learn under John, so I was traveling for 8 hours, and now I do the same thing to the States 2 or 3 times a year and to John. And I think actually it's almost like a trick, isn't it? Like if you just go to class every day and you take it for granted, whereas when you travel, you go, hey, I'm only here for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I paid $5,000 to get here. I'm taking every little bit. So I feel that probably like John found, and I was lucky to have him as a mentor as well, that really, really, really helped me get through, like as much information as I could and retain it. Because there's so much information out there now. What are you retaining? And John, his way of viewing jiu-jitsu changed me as a coach and as an athlete for sure. He's a great guy, and he talks very highly of you still. You're still frequented in many of his stories.
That'll end soon enough. He'll get over it. No, but one of the things that he taught me was to always, on any technique, ask a question. What does this hand do? What does this hand do? What does this foot do? What does this foot do? What does your head do? Answer, like, you haven't learned the technique if you can't answer those things. You may not understand it fully, but don't just watch a technique. Just always ask those 4 questions. Anytime someone's showing you a technique, before you let them go, just say, do I understand what this hand's supposed to be doing? Do I understand what this hand's supposed to be doing? Do I understand what the feet are supposed to be doing? Do I understand where my head's supposed to be? And there's other stuff too, like balance, pulling, pushing, all that kind of stuff. But it disciplines you because so often someone will show a technique and they'll call your attention to the things that they think are important, which again, as John points out, are probably the things that were taught to them when they first learned it. But that may not actually be what's actually important to pay attention to, but everyone remembers how they first learned a technique. So you teach it that way, but you've probably modified it since then, right? So it's like, that's good. Sure. You tell me, grab here, do this, do this, do this. What's that foot doing? Because it might make you realize, oh, wait, the hip's supposed to be way out to here to get the right angle. So when you start asking those questions, you take a closer look at the technique, and that's what he got me to do, and it's helpful.
That's tremendous. I think that's great advice for all students. You spoke before about, rolling with Hegan and having this crazy, experience of that pressure and things. You've been able to roll and train with like the who's who. You're now with Cesar Gracie. Am I correct, Dave?
Yeah, well, it's Cesar and his guys. I've been training for years. So Gil, Melendez, and Nick and Nate Diaz are under Cesar, and Jake Shields, and I have other friends too who are under Hoyler Gracie and Saulo Rivera. There's a lot of different people around here. I'm like Switzerland. I get to train with them.
You've got the world-class people surrounding you. Out of all the people, is there anyone that stood out to you as the toughest? The person that you would bet most on to beat you in a competition? Did anyone just blow you out of the water? I remember the first time, for instance, for me, feeling Higgins' pressure. Any of the Machados, rolling with them is always a privilege. Even a technician like John Will. I've been able to grapple with some tremendous athletes, but who in your mind stands out as that guy that you just went, oh my God, this guy or girl maybe?
First of all, there are many, many guys. I could list 20 off the top of my head, and there's many, many more I've never met who would easily beat me in a competition, who I'd not want to face. And even the me who is younger and whose body works a little bit better than it does today. But for me, for sure it's Higgin. He'd be the biggest standout, just like not possible to beat. You can get out of it. And I can tell you some stories of that. Then there's also, of course, Jean-Jacques is amazing. I've never seen Jean-Jacques have a problem, with anything. And Jean-Jacques, is a smaller guy. So maybe it's even more amazing. And, I know well, and I've trained with Marcelo Garcia, and they're all like horrible experiences, and you've got Hoyler, you've got all these guys, big and small, they're all terrible. They're all horrible experiences. But the reason that Higgin will always be the one to me is he is so creative. I mean, Jean-Jacques and the other brothers as well too. But Higgin is like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like his cellular fibers just know how to move in jiu-jitsu the right way. And he's seen so much. And even back then, you know, he so aggressively went after wrestling and judo. I mean, we went into judo matches together. I went in and put on a black belt into judo matches and I was the 5th Machado brother at one judo tournament we went to. You know, that was tough to pull off. But we went to judo matches. He did wrestling. He did sambo competitions. Higgin was like a grappling encyclopedia, and he was so hungry. There was a time when he took 2 of our best brown belts. It wasn't Bob Bass. There was 2 others, a Brazilian brown belt named João, and I think it was Mike Nordstrom, who was our biggest, toughest brown belt at that time. This was before I was a black belt. Those guys were ahead of me. I was a purple belt. And Higgin laid down on the ground and gave one of the brown belts this arm in an armbar position. Gave the other brown belt this arm. Their feet were crossing, right? In an armbar position. 2 arm bars at the same time. Bent his arms a little bit, and he said, go. Right? And not only could they not finish him in either of the 2 arm bars, but he got out. While fighting 2 guys at once, got around and choked out one guy while the other guy was on his back trying to choke him out, flipped him over and got the other guy too. It was just like, this is not possible. You just can't do it. And there was no side. Both of those guys were bigger than him. They were excellent brown belts. And he gave them the arm bar extended. And there were 2 arm bars. And it's just unbelievable to me. And he would do this kind of stuff all the time. He would beat anybody. I remember when Ken Shamrock, great fighter, this early days of UFC, massive, strong guy, came in to visit. And to his credit, he was just interested in rolling, you know, and he rolled with Higgin, and Higgin toyed with him, you know.
Wow.
And then, of course, Jean-Jacques did too, and then everyone was lining up like, give my chance. And it wasn't because Ken Shamrock wasn't amazing. Ken Shamrock is amazing. But that's what I'm saying. Higgin is on this level of being able to adapt to anything. So he's always the one that stands out to me for sure.
Wow. Yeah. No,
I gotta say, with Jean-Jacques following a close second, and all the brothers there's so many great. I mean, one of the cool things about jiu-jitsu is there's so many different ways to make it work, right? So you can't look at a guy and know anything about him. Like I learned that. I remember the day I learned that lesson. This Brazilian guy, I thought I was like a hot shit white belt. Because I could tap blue belts, right? Because remember, I had my whole experience then, and I used to train every single day, and I trained under Higgin Machado and Jean-Jacques every single day, and every day I was on the mat, there would be at least 3 of the brothers, black belts. I mean, we were in a cauldron of fire, right? Yeah. And one day this guy comes in kind of unshaven, pudgy, he's traveling across the United States, he's Brazilian, he puts on a purple belt, and I'm like, I'm going to beat a purple belt today. Like I was just sure about it. Like he doesn't look like he's been training for like 2 years. He's been traveling. He's fat. He's clearly out of shape. I just thought today's my day. I'm going to get a notch on my belt with a purple belt. And that guy beat me so easily, right? And then I've had the guys who were short and the guys who were strong and the guys who were big and the guys who were lanky. And it's just like anybody can be great at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because you will use the attributes that you have. You just truly cannot judge a book by its cover. And then you get the opposite too, right? Guy comes in all burly, shredded, got, cauliflower ears, and he's not good. Right? Because he's been getting his ears hit a lot. That's why he's got cauliflower ears, but he's not good. What I mean to say is that there are so many people who are great in so many different ways. Like you train with Carlos Machado. Unbelievable his nickname is Seneca, which is like the sleepy one, right? So easy going, so effortless, and yet he'll just toy with you, right? Jean-Jacques, to me, I always say like there's how gravity works on the planet Earth, and then how gravity works when you're fighting Jean-Jacques, because gravity doesn't work normally. You float. like things don't happen correctly. Like all physics go weird with Jean-Jacques. You know, John, another great example, John Machado, right?
Yep.
Very different, kind of more aggressive style, you know, but also equally unbeatable for me. Marcelo Garcia, amazing with his chokes and darces and half guard and arm drags. And, you know, Jake Shields with his Jacatine, you know, like these guys are so good at so many different things. Cesar Gracie's phenomenal, right? And he'll just catch you in a million. He's got so many interesting things that you just have never seen and would never know to defend against. And so there's so many opportunities, I think, to be amazing, that really that list is just a very long list of people who are just amazing to me and untouchable, and each of them for entirely different reasons.
Wow, that's so cool. I know for myself, even training with all 5 of the Machado brothers in the past, how 5 brothers even, and their body types differ, but I mean, they're all related, but they're so different jiu-jitsu. It's just, I mean, equally dominant, obviously. What separates those guys? I mean, you've got world-class competitors, coaches, students, whatever, but what do you think separates the world-class competitor from the just typical guy who competes once or twice? What have you seen? You've been surrounded by tremendous athletes that have achieved the highest levels in MMA and Jiu-Jitsu. What do you think the differences are?
So I think that there's a number of different things that go into it, and they can go, they're like they're like ingredients in a cake or something, and they can go in differing amounts depending upon the person. So obviously it's can be a really good thing to have natural talent. And there's some people that have natural talent for sure. And that natural talent may just be they just generally always tend to move the right way because they got a good nat sense, they got a good feel for it, they were born with a good feel for it. Or it can be they have natural attributes that are really good, like super flexible or super strong, super fast. So those things are good, and when added in to a lot of other good attributes can be important. But I know for sure that is not the crucial ingredient, because I know so many people who will say they didn't have natural, and I know they didn't. Eddie Bravo is amazing, right? Now, he was an athletic guy, and he did some wrestling, you know, before he came in, but he never thought of himself as an athlete. He'll tell you he's not an athlete. He just completely dissected jiu-jitsu and created his whole system, which is, you know, fantastic. I think John Will, who's, I think, a very talented athlete, but he said he's worked for everything he's got. You know, it did not come naturally to him. I think Higgin, too, not necessarily a natural, phenomenal athlete, you know, athletic guy, you know. So, but I do think the natural talent can help if it doesn't hinder your learning, right? Because sometimes when things come too easy, you're not really understanding why they work, because you don't have to understand why they work, because they just magically work, right? And you know that.
Yep.
And that goes back to what you were saying, where if you have to work for it, you tend to know it better. Like if you're going to another country or hearing someone teach in a different language, like Brazilian, Portuguese, and you don't understand it, well, then you're going to watch really closely what's happening, which can sometimes even be better than listening to what they're saying. Because what I said before, and John will tell you that too, just don't listen to what they say, just watch what they do. But so I think there is, this is actually a big question. I think in terms of the competitive aspect, like what on the day of the competition, what is differentiating the great guys? I think that there is a level of a depth of knowledge. Like there's nowhere you can push the person where they are uncomfortable or haven't been or don't know where to go. Okay, there's no corner. You can't catch them in a corner. Push them down any path, and there's a way out where they come on top. So that's generally true of the really great people. There's just that, like Higgin, right?
Yep.
For most people, that is a dead end.
Yeah, double dead.
There cannot be a better dead end than that, right? And for him, like, oh no, there's a way out of that. No problem, right? Now you just kind of turn your shoulder and turn and backflip, and you know. So I think the really good guys have that kind of attitude that it's all, you're never playing their game. Even and Hickson would do that too. He would just let people mount him and just kind of start from there. And it's like people would say, I never had a chance to train with him, but people would say, you never felt like you're on the mount and you feel like you're completely out of control. Like you have no control over what's going on, right? Because of the way he moves and the way he takes you up and moves. So I think that that's a unique trait, is they have enough knowledge and enough experience that there is no physical orientation in space and no orientation vis-a-vis you for which they do not have an answer and feel very comfortable. And honestly, probably 5 or 6 answers, right?
Yeah.
The second thing is they don't become wedded to any one technique. Like they're not fixated on doing this one thing they want to do. And maybe that comes from having so many options, right? It doesn't matter. When you push, a reaction is going to happen, right? I don't have to care if I touch you. I don't have to care. I just know you're going to react. And if I have something to adapt to every possibility there, all I'm doing is like starting a ball rolling down the hill. The ball's going to get to the bottom of the hill. I don't know how it's going to get. Maybe it's going to bounce left. Maybe it's going to bounce right. But I'll tell you right now, once the ball starts rolling, it's going to get to the bottom of the hill. And that's kind of how it is with them. I've never felt a guy who was really good, like persisting on something where it felt like, dude, it's just not there, right? It's not working. It's never anything like that. It's always like a flow where, like I say, each move feels like you're constantly doing something wrong. Like you never feel like that was successful. Like I pushed there, shoot, my arm got caught. I tried to stop from being swept there, shoot, I swept the other way. You always feel like every move you make is the wrong move, yeah. So I think that it's that kind of understanding and not being wedded to one thing. And you can call that, there's an ego involved. Like you got to have an ego, but you can't have too big of an ego to get that good because you got to tolerate losing. You got to tolerate experimentation. Another thing I've noticed of the people who are really, really good is they are perfectly happy to experiment, right? They really enjoy learning, right? They're very interested in learning new things. They're very inquisitive. If you do something that strikes them as good or odd, they point that out. They go, oh, interesting. And then they try to get you to do it again. And, maybe one more time later, they've got to figure it out and it's handled. But so it's a very kind of a playful, Cesar Gracie, very playful, Higgins, super playful, Jean-Jacques, playful, just kind of almost like a joyous, and even the guys I know who are very aggressive, they still have that kind of play aspect in them, or they get to they plateau, yes. And that may be all you need. Like for MMA, you don't need to be off in the stratosphere on jiu-jitsu. You just need good enough jiu-jitsu that you can handle yourself and whatever. So sometimes those guys don't get to that level, but the people who are willing to play, or Eddie Bravo just has fun with it and he's naming things and he's just, you just start going down a path and you never escape.
Yeah, wow, that's so succinct. Thank you so much for such a thorough answer. I know a lot of people ask me that question and, you have much more experience than me to draw on, but I would agree with everything you said. That's incredible. I think people will probably read your shirt and wonder about your shirt. A lot of people probably don't know from me. But
animals were made. Yeah. We're using the production of this.
Yeah, I like it. As soon as I read it, I was like, I bet my wife buys me one of those. I've been following like a vegan plant-based diet for 5 or 6 years now, I think. You obviously have a plant-based diet. A lot of people out there have probably never even heard about that. In fact, I guess some of the meathead culture maybe that's crept into jiu-jitsu a little bit would be a bit against that, but how did you come about being like a vegan, and how have you found it help your jiu-jitsu? I know it's helped my jiu-jitsu a lot and certainly hasn't hindered me with strength or anything like that. I've seen only benefits, but you've been plant-based for a lot longer than me, I think, and you've obviously, world champ, great success.
Well, okay, so and this is an issue that I'm happy to talk about, and I think I can make a lot of sense. So you meat eater guys, don't turn off your video just yet. So first of all, I think that people should just set aside preconceived notions. You do experiment, you see what works for you. If what works for you is eating, hamburgers every day, then eat hamburgers every day. Your body will tell you. What has worked for me and works for pretty much everybody I know who's tried it is cutting down or cutting out of animal products. I'll tell you a little bit about that in the beginning. And I became vegetarian. I stopped eating, beef and chicken, and very shortly thereafter fish, way back in like 85. Okay, so this was a long time ago. Not long. I got out of college. I'm 55 years old. So that was a long time ago. Then a few years later, I cut out, over a period of time, cut out dairy and eggs. So I haven't eaten dairy or eggs since like the early 90s. So whatever that is, 20 years. So, and needless to say, I don't feel any, not only do I don't feel any problem from it, I think I've got amazing, endurance. And to be sure, you can't just be out of shape and change your diet and then suddenly have amazing endurance, right? So I think I have really good endurance and strength because I train very hard. But the reason I'm able to train very hard, and the reason I'm able to train frequently, and the reason I'm able to train at a high energy level for long periods of time and recover very quickly is the clean diet, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
so that's the real advantage.
Too.
What's that?
The recovery benefits.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I roll every day. I lift weights every day. I do conditioning every day and teach every day, obviously. And I just found I was having real hard time recovering. And obviously I didn't want to use drugs or anything like that to recover. And yeah, once my diet changed, it was so much easier.
Yeah. So, I don't think anyone will disagree that cleaning up your diet's a good thing. So it's just, like cutting out all the really highly processed stuff or massive amounts of sugar or stop smoking, whatever. So that's all in agreement. But on the issue of the animal protein specifically, I actually did a video about that, which you should link to if you haven't seen it. Just for the fun of it.
It's a great video, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So put a
little link in the video.
Okay, but the basic thing is I came to it not because of health. I came to it because I'm an animal lover. That's it. So once I had heard enough times that, it is possible to survive, that there are people who are vegetarian or vegan and they actually can survive. And there are lots of them in India, and they live long, that it's possible. That started me thinking, well, hey, if it's possible to survive and perhaps even be healthier, I saw a lot of research about avoiding cancer and things like that. I thought, maybe it's worth a try. Why hurt animals if I don't have to, right? Yep. So that was where it came to for me. The fact that it felt great and that I feel that it has definite health benefits, again, for me, people make their own decision, is a plus. The fact that it has definite environmental benefits, especially in the States where most of our meat, dairy is coming from large factory farms that are just horrible environmental polluters. It may not be as bad in Australia. You might have different, ways of producing things, but in the States, it's certainly a big, big environmental concern. But for me, it's simply a matter of this, right? If you want to look at it this way, just for a second, you could look at animals as food machines, right? We feed them, we grow crops or let them graze, and they are intaking food crops, and they are producing muscles on their body, right? And we are then, if we want to eat them, we are killing them, and they're also producing a lot of other stuff, right? Crap and greenhouse gas, all the other stuff. So there's a lot of waste in this little machine that we've created, right? But we're taking part of that, and that's a way that we can get nutrients, and they're certainly high in protein and other stuff like that. We could also take the same stuff directly without that processing machine, and take it directly into us, right? So they're just getting protein that they're turning into protein from plants. We can eat plants too. We're not going to eat grass, but we can eat, beans and legumes and things with nearly the same protein count, but none of the fat and, none of the there might be some pesticide on what we're eating, but the cow is eating a lot more of it to make that pound of meat, right? So there's a concentration of the pesticides. You're not getting that. Again, maybe it doesn't happen in Australia as much, but growth hormones, antibiotics, the things they feed animals to keep them alive in these cramped conditions where they want to maximize production. You're not getting that with the plant-based stuff. But what you're just getting is cleaner energy. And if you're eating, a good balance of food, you're getting all the protein you need. I think most people think they need way more protein than they do, but I have no shortage of protein. Beans and legumes and quinoa, I don't even pay attention to it, right? And the green leafy vegetables and all that stuff. So there's no question, and the science is very clear on that. You can actually survive, be very healthy, and probably be a lot healthier if you eat a good, balanced vegan diet. If you eat potato chips, you'll be an unhealthy vegan. You know what I mean? You could eat anything. Motor oil is vegan. Well, maybe dinosaurs, but you get my point. Eat a healthy diet, right? You can eat a healthy diet with some meat. You can eat a healthy diet without some meat, especially on the dairy. The dairy, a lot of people have even low levels of lactose intolerance. They get a little congested. Most people say that when you have dairy. So you just eliminate that. And as for a fighter, it's much better. You can breathe so much better. You don't have the phlegm that gets in your throat. That's the first thing I tell people to experiment with. If they're a fighter, I'm like, you know what? Cut down on dairy, cut out dairy, see how you feel. Because that's an immediate thing. But so my experience with it, and I'm sure it's yours too, is my energy level's high. It's easy for me to digest, so I don't like eat and then like fall asleep.
Yeah, food coma. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I feel good. I feel energetic. I just think it's where anyone who's serious about their health should experiment with it. The thing I would say though is you don't have to be like all or nothing. Like this word vegan. People say I'm a vegan. I don't know. Is it a lifestyle? You know, it's a diet. Like you don't have to be a vegan. You could be a hunter. I don't care. Be a American. Be a whatever you want. But we're talking about a diet. What do you eat, right? So I happen to eat a 100% vegan diet. But you know what? If someone says, hey, I feel better when I cut out 50% of the dairy, you know, or I only have meat on weekends, you know, or whatever, fine. You know, whatever works for them. It's not all or nothing. It's just move along that scale. But for me, the farther you can move along that scale, the better you feel. That's definitely been true for me and true for everybody I've worked with.
Yeah, 100%. No, thanks for illuminating that. I think that'll answer a few people's questions about the shirt. And yeah, certainly I don't talk about it much, you know, in my academy stuff, only if people ask me or online. But, you know, the dozens of people that have been in touch with me that just told me that they were going on plant-based and wanted to know how it would help their jiu-jitsu. And I'm like, well, you know, I've been doing that for a while. When it's helped me, it certainly seems that the further you move, the better you feel. And yeah, I know some students now who they just all like, you know, plant-based during the day and then with their family at night, you know, eat omnivorously or whatever. And yeah, they say the same thing. It's just the best you feel, you know. And I mean, what else would we want, right? Everyone
and I would say, you know, there's something called the Gracie diet. You know, Carlos Gracie, before they came to the States, he was a nutritionist, and that was a vegetarian diet. It wasn't vegan, but it was vegetarian. They had dairy. And that was really present in the family that, you know, when the family came to the United States and, you know, all the weightlifting and the, you know, the kind of, it's hard not to get kind of pulled into that kind of culture, but there's still a lot of Gracie family members who ascribe to that. And like I mentioned, Jake Shields, who I train with, he's actually, he was born to hippie parents and,
really?
I don't know if they were hippie parents, but they're West Coast parents, but never, he was vegetarian and now vegan since a kid, right? He's never eaten meat ever.
Wow.
So Jake is unstoppable that way. You know, Nick and Nate Diaz are both vegan, have been for a long, long time, and they're doing triathlons. My wife, Galina, you know, finished an Ironman triathlon. She's vegan. Yeah, so there's a lot of athletes now who are, and there's other MMA fighters too, and I think Uriah Faber's vegetarian. There's a lot of people. Randy Couture, I think, was vegetarian later part of his career. There's a lot of interesting people out there experimenting with diet stuff. So I definitely think if you're serious about your conditioning, your strength, you definitely owe it yourself to experiment with reduction at the very least.
That's some nice words. On another topic, David, one of the questions I get asked all the time, and like me, you got into martial arts because of, you know, self-defense, fighting, blah, blah, blah. And then later competed as a sport jiu-jitsu athlete like myself. You know, it's something I enjoy doing once or twice a year. But I get this question all the time, this street versus sport. And you've got people that say, I don't want to compete. It's just going to get me beat up on the street. And then you get, you know, people saying, well, okay, you might not do a reverse Stella worm guard on the street, but if you're a competitor and you train with sport jiu-jitsu, you're going to be tough enough to just take the guy down, get to mount, slap him and choke him. What's your take on it? Because you've got guys like, for instance, I've seen academies around the world that actually don't even roll at all because they go, no, we just train for street. We're not trying to wrestle.
Our stuff is deadly.
Yeah, right. And then you've got, you know, just train sport. You know, they've never even trained from their feet, let alone anti-strikes. What's your take on it? I mean, for people out there, because I think a lot of people, there's a lot of mixed opinions. What's your take on it? You've obviously excelled in all areas. What's your take on things?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say I've excelled in all areas, but I think I'm pretty well rounded. I've had a few street fights and I haven't lost.
Oh, excellent.
But the woman was like 94 years old, so that doesn't really count.
You stole her purse first, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's the old joke. Me and my buddy were walking home from school and we got into a fight, 10 against 2. Can you believe it? Once our 8 friends showed up, we kicked those 2 guys' asses. No, but anyway. No, but what I think is, my take on it is this. First of all, it's always true that if you're not enjoying something, you're not going to train. So you should, fundamentally do whatever you're going to enjoy doing in training. Like you can say, I'm going to train like a serious self-defense thing and no sport, and it's so intense and not fun that you don't keep doing it. Well, then what good is that? You're not even doing that, right? But I think the truth is, for me, I used to be one of those people who felt like sport was bad, probably for the reasons that you're saying. Because I felt like, by definition, sport, to be made safe, has to remove certain dangerous moves, right? And so if it's judo or jiu-jitsu, well, then you're not striking, right? And you're not, it's not even the dangerous moves. Eye gouging is actually a pretty good fighting technique. If you've ever caught an accidental eye gouge, which I did recently, that can shut you down pretty damn quick. So don't forget the old eye gouge, folks. But, but whether it's, elbow strikes to the bridge of the nose, whatever, there's dangerous moves, small joint breaks, and, there's things you can do to people, or attacks on the ankles and heels that'll rip out their knees. There are some things that, understandably, in sports, you remove those things, right? Oh, how about like a knife? You remove that too, right? So I used to feel, before I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that by removing those things and then training the other stuff again and again and again, you were basically training yourself to not do the more lethal move, but to do the more tame move, let's say. And I think you were referring to that. But I am definitely now of the camp that you also mentioned, which is, look, I will take a guy who has rehearsed something for real for years against opponents who are trying to stop him any day of the week in a fight, if all I know is that, like a wrestler, let's just say, against someone who has trained, eye gouge, knee to the groin, again, fear, no one's got a knife or anything like that, or a gun, but never actually done it against someone who is trying to stop you equally hard, right? You're doing the most dangerous move you can think of. I don't know what it is. You're practicing your headbutts, against the bridge of the nose. You're practicing it again and again and again and again against the punching bag. But you have never held a guy in a tie who is trying to do it to you too, as hard as you're trying to do it to him. Always, I'll go with the guy who has never heard of a headbutt, but he's going to pick you up in the air and put you on the concrete really hard because he's been doing it to guys who know how to stop it, and he's been doing it for years, right? So I feel like there is a middle ground in there somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. That there is a way that it makes sense. It's like any training, any sparring, any training of any type, even especially in fighting, always involves giving up something in the reality so you can train it, right? Mm-hmm. You train to become a fighter pilot in a simulator before you become a fighter pilot. So you're training. You're not really getting a chance to, launch missiles at people or whatever. When you're training with a gun, with a firearm, right? Most of your training is not shooting guys who are actually shooting live ammunition back to you, right? It's various forms of training where we'll do target practice. We'll do into some sort of a course where things are coming at us. We'll do paintball, where we really can shoot at people. But they're all changing the reality in some way so you can get at this real thing called fighting. Mm-hmm. We're going to work this aspect of it. Now we're going to work this aspect. So that's the way I view it, right? So if to step into the center and do the real thing fighting, you can't do that very often because that's fighting. People are going to get hurt. But what you can do is say, let's do the grappling part of fighting really hard over here. We'll make it safe. We won't strike at each other. We won't do these really dangerous things, but we'll get really good at this stuff. Now, we will practice these really dangerous strikes, but we'll practice that against a bag, or a dummy or something like that. That's not going to be all of our practice, though. We'll throw that in there. We will do some, we'll do our strength training over here. We'll do our flexibility training. And all of those things together leave you as a person, I think, who can fight. The other important thing, so I think you also can go too far if you go to just a BJJ school that does nothing but gi, jiu-jitsu, and never does anything else. I think, like I say, you're still in pretty good shape. But it would be good to fight a little bit. It would be good to exchange some strikes, whether it's on the ground or stand up. I think everybody has to remember, like I hear people say, I don't like training with a gi because a gi isn't realistic. People don't walk around wearing gis. My feeling on that is some people do wear jackets. You can choke people out. I've done it before with T-shirts. But at the end of the day, what? So you think standing there in shorts and a rash guard on a padded surface with no objects around you, no one jumping in and kicking you in the head when you're not looking, that's really that realistic? When's the last time you saw that fight go down? You know, maybe at a beach or something like that, where other people are forming a ring and not letting anyone get into the fight. But basically speaking, I'm sitting here right now in my own house, and there's corners of desks, and there's metal bottles, and there's a window I can toss people out of. You know what I'm saying? And there's shit to trip over. Fighting is messy. There's no way. So I think you've got to train it all, is what I'm saying. And the other real key element that really has me sold on the power of sport is the adrenaline training, right? Unless you're doing some sort of, and there are things like this, you know, Jeff Thompson in England and John Isford, some of these guys who really do find creative ways to work highly adrenalized situations outside of sport, but it's still padded. I mean, it's still sporty, but highly adrenalized. But most of, I think, the training that goes on in martial arts schools is not adrenalized, and that's the real missing piece. Like when you're scared, when you have tunnel vision. And I think you can get to that in a competition. I mean, once you compete enough, you start to lose it. So you got to like find other competitions and stuff because you get used to it. And the truth is, you're not thinking you're going to die walking into a competition. But that fear, or that stress, or that people are watching you, at least gives you a taste of that. So when you do find yourself and shit, something's really going down, like right now, it's real, right? You've had that feeling before. Like it's real. It's every day is not just like training with your friends. So I don't know if that answers, but my take is be in the middle somewhere, slant it over towards the sport training, because that's going to build the toughness, that's going to build the timing, that's going to build the grit, that's going to build your ability to keep pushing through when the shit gets hard, and that's going to build the adrenal training. But don't forget, don't sit here and play your whole life with your wet legs wide open and your spider guard and forget you do actually have a groin, right? You know? And it's like, why don't you pay attention? But that could be fixed sometimes just by like adding in the slapping, like some of the competitions are doing now. Just let's just remind each other that this is a martial art after all.
Yeah, I think you've got the wisest answer. That feels very congruent to me. You got a cat there in your lap.
Yes, this is my New Orleans Katrina rescue cat from 12 years ago.
Well, you actually run an adoption charity-based organization, right?
Right.
Can you tell us about that? We can perhaps put a link down the bottom for people that might be able to support it. Yeah, please explain.
I'm a big animal lover, as I mentioned. The charity I run is actually based in North America. It's called adoptapet.com. And it's a searchable database of adoptable pets at animal shelters across all of the U.S. and Canada. And lots of people come and they can say what kind of animal they're looking for. And you've got a similar thing, I think, in Australia with adoptapet.au, I suppose. I think it's run by the RSPCA out there.
Yes, that's where we got our two dogs at home. Yeah, just adoption dogs. It's a great way to, if you're going to.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to go. And you'd be surprised. You can find purebreds if that's what you're after. But, you know, when you get an animal out of a shelter, you can see their behavior. I mean, even if they're a puppy, you know, I think that they recognize, they're thankful. You know, there's some sort of a bond that comes there. And I think if you live in an area where there really is no need and there's no animal shelters or something, then, you know, go to a breeder or whatever. But I'm a big believer in at least check out your local animal shelter first, see if you can, you know, give an animal a home that needs a home. And that is something that I believe in a lot. And that's something I obviously work for. And then I helped lead the rescue effort of the animals that were left behind after there were thousands and thousands of animals stuck in homes during the flood after New Orleans. And we just had a similar experience, not nearly as bad, in Houston, Texas, with big flooding. And I was helping coordinate that. So I'm definitely, you know, kicking ass and helping pets. That's my business card.
Ah, that is awesome. I love that, David. You know, I get a lot of guys. You mentioned you're 55. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So as a 55-year-old, obviously I'm, as a 30-year-old, a lot younger than a lot of the people that ask me this question. So I can't give my best advice other than the advice I give to my white belts and blue and purple who are 40 plus. But I get questions all this time saying, what advice would you give to a 40 plus year old white belt? They're starting out. They feel that they're not the 20-year-old hyper competitive young kid who never gets sore. You've obviously still maintained such a high level of your jiu-jitsu. How do you feel, like, what advice would you give to that 40-year-old or 45-year-old white belt or 55-year-old white belt involved in jiu-jitsu?
So my advice, and I'm sure it's the same advice you would give, is two things is what's under your control and then kind of what comes outside of you, or what you do with your body, what comes outside of you. On the what comes outside of you, you've got to find partners who have good control and who don't have ego and who are perfectly happy who are not going to injure you. That's very important. So you don't want to be training in a place where guys are so aggressive and, you know, hell-bent on winning that they're willing to injure people. So you need to have people who will train hard with you, but who can modulate to whatever is your level as you're learning. That's very important. And if you don't feel you have that, go find another school. That's important. On your side, on the side of what you can do for yourself, I think very much it's be very good at warming up. It's all about joints to me. You know, when I used to see guys who were older and they seemed to have like lost some of their bulk. And I always thought like kind of that's just what happens when you get older. And it probably is, you know, in your 60s maybe, you know, or 70s, you get old. Sure, you're going to lose some of your muscle mass. But what I've experienced and what I've seen is for the guys where I've seen that, it's not that they can't maintain their muscle mass. It's that they've hurt their joints and so they can't do the pull-ups anymore. Can't do as many push-ups, can't lift as heavy weight or whatever. That's certainly to the extent that I've lost some of my just kind of bulk. It's just because my elbows are screwed up. And so, and to some extent that's going to happen when you do a sport like this for 30 years, really competitively. But I think that anything you could do to preserve your joint, and the best things, your joints, is going to be absolutely what you want to do. And the best answer I have for that, and it's no magic answer, is warm up really well, get your joints warmed up, you know, do your mobility, don't skimp on that. Swing your arms, roll your neck, you know, get everything nice and warm before you train, and then do the same thing when you're done. Spend a couple minutes so you don't stiffen up. And, you know, if you get your soft tissue massage or whatever, do that. Just maintain your flexibility. Big into yoga. You know, whatever you can do to maintain your joint flexibility and generally warm up well, that's going to reduce the chances of injury. And, you know, drink a lot of water, also reduce the chances of injury, and train with partners. I think that's the main thing. Once you can do that, you'll train for decades.
Wow, that's awesome advice. Thank you so much for that. Two questions to finish off, and then I'll let you go about your day. You're no doubt a very busy man.
Wife is texting me, no problem.
Oh, is it your wife? Is it? Well, she's your boss. You better do that. I've been married 10 years. I know how this goes. All right. Tell me, what is the biggest benefit that Jiu-Jitsu has given to you in your life, David? If you had to say one thing.
I'd say meeting you, obviously. That's an interesting question, because at various times I would say different things. I have to say objectively, probably the biggest benefit it's given me is meeting John and Hayan and my friends. So much of my social support structure and my friends, you know, for decades now are my friends from the martial arts. So wasn't what I set out to do, but it's definitely, in the end, it's probably the thing that'll last, you know, more than everything else, right? Yep. So it's the people I've met, the quality of the people I've met, sometimes the kind of nutty people I've met, but mostly the quality. I think, you know, when we talk about martial arts for me, keep in mind I started very, very young, so I've never known a time when I didn't have martial arts, right? Sure. So, but I feel like confidence for sure. Maybe it may be unfounded confidence, you know, maybe beating myself, but whatever. I'm happy, you know, most people don't get in many fights in their life. That's the kind of funny thing. You know, I used to say to people, like, especially once I started training hard in jiu-jitsu, you know, and there's injuries and stuff like that. Like, I would say, if you're going into martial arts for self-defense, trust me, just get beaten up a couple times in your life. You will be in much better shape if you just don't train martial arts. Just go to the beach, drink your samosas on Sunday mornings, do whatever you normally do. Don't do any training, have all of these hours that come back to you, and then get beaten up like 2-3 times. You may lose a tooth, you may get a broken bone or whatever, but you will have much less injuries over the course of your life. Right?
I like that. That's funny.
But that said, I mean, there's certainly a confidence. Look, jiu-jitsu, it's not just confidence in fighting, it's just confidence in general, right? Presence. And for me, for sure, in my work, in my building an organization that helps animals, in everything I do, negotiations, leadership, figuring out how to deal with difficult situations, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in particular, it's such a life lesson for me. I can give you so many interesting examples of this. We're trying to solve a problem, right? And I think, okay, well, there's the end goal of the problem, but there might be a midway point that if we can just get this far, the problem will kind of solve itself, right? Well, like a tipping point. That's jiu-jitsu, right? You don't oversweep. You don't have to flip someone over and then grind them into the ground. You just need to flip them over far enough that they are now falling, then stop sweeping and get your control position. So when they hit the ground, you're in a control position. Same thing in solving problems. Don't look for always the end goal. Just find the tipping point and then attack the tip for the tipping point. When to push, when to pull, being open-minded towards different ways of getting where you're going. John Will talks about 5% improvement. Like, how do you get out of a bad situation, right? How can you get 5% better, 5% better, and then you're out. Same thing in life, investing, So many of the lessons of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu inform absolutely everything that I do. Being goal-oriented, but open to how you get there, right? So what we were talking about, like, I know I'm going to win the fight. I know I'm going to get you, but I don't know if it's going to be an armbar. I don't know if it's going to be a footlock. I don't know if it's going to be a choke. I don't know how we're going to get there. I have a plan. Having a plan is important too, because I'm going to get us going down a funnel, which I hope is going to work my way. But I can adapt, right? That's true. That's true in life, and that's absolutely the story of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? That's what Jiu-Jitsu means, right? The gentle art, being able to bend and adapt. So I feel like if you're training in particularly Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and you're not seeing it that way, start looking for that stuff, because those are the real kind of life lessons that are there.
There's a lot of wisdom dropped there, people. Final question. What's the biggest white belt mistake you see being made on the mats? Could be
well, okay, so I'll give two answers to that. The biggest physical mistake white belts make is they're too tense, right? They're just tense. Got to relax, and be well, which leads to the non-physical mistake, which is trying to win at all. Like being ego, caring about winning. Like, you don't know enough to try to win. Like, you can try to win, you can have fun, but what you're really there is try to learn. Be willing to experiment. Don't assume you can beat people. Like, if you're a white belt and you can beat a lot of people in your school, you're training in a shitty school, man. You're white belt. You know what I mean? So you got to just say, like Jean-Jacques would say, you know what? Sometimes you're the hammer and sometimes you're the nail, right? You got to just accept being the nail for a few years and embrace your nailness, Just learn when things happen, say, that was interesting. Ask people why that happened. Just get your ego out of it. Relax. That'll help with your injuries, right? And it'll be great. And, a black belt is a white belt who just never stopped. I mean, that's the way I see it. That's it. If you stick with it, you're going to get better and better and better. So just how do you stick with it? Don't get injured. Keep it fun.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, David. This has been such an honor. It's a pleasure to actually talk with you in person for the first time. And I certainly hope we get to share some mat space and you can beat me up next year.
I'll look for you at the Pan Ams. Have safe travels, and thanks for reaching out to me. I'm really honored. And to all your students, all your friends, hope to meet all you guys real soon.
Hey, sounds awesome, David. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
See ya.
Take care.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. For more videos, click here. To subscribe to this channel to get all of our awesome videos, click here. And if you'd like to have our hour-long series for free on footlocks and how to defend footlocks and leg attacks of all kinds, please click here. I'm Coach Tom, guys. I'll see you next time.